Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Talking Business with Chad and Mike. Today, we are joined by guest Jonathan Sheppard and Michael. Tell our audience a little bit about Jonathan as we get started here today.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Talking Business with Chad and Michael, and welcome, Jonathan. It's really great to have you on the show. So a little bit about Jonathan. Jonathan Sheppard is president and CEO of Sheppard Associates, a full-service attorney search and executive placement firm servicing top-tier mid to large-size law firms, corporations, and nonprofits. Operating from the prism of generational inclusiveness, quote, the generality of work today, boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Z, John spends his time advocating for all four generations. As John says, I'll quote for John, we have four generations working together, trying to figure each other out. This generality and the issues surrounding it has brought John to our podcast today, which is why we're having you on here today. And I am very, very interested in this because I have also worked with four generations and I'd love to learn a little bit more. And I think our audience would too. So Chad, back to you, my friend.
All right. So our icebreaker today, Jonathan. If you could have dinner with any two people, living or dead, who would they be and why?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Living or dead? Okay, dead. Probably a famous athlete like Willie Mays to see what the talent was like of that individual. I still want to know how he made that catch in the World Series, the over the shoulder, because that really was beyond possibility and he made it happen. Living. There are a lot of people that I'd like, but I think Warren Buffett would be probably top of my list because he has an understanding of people that is very simple, yet very effective.
Very nice. What about for you, Michael?
That's a great, Willie Mays. Wow, if it's Willie Mays, I'd love to have that. Well, I read a book about Willie, and that would be truly terrific. So Abraham Lincoln. I mean, if I were going to have, from somebody who is dead, I'd love to have a conversation with Abraham Lincoln. I was fascinated by him. Now, actually, I've had conversations with him when I've seen him at the Lincoln Memorial, but he hasn't talked back. But as far as a living person, Bill Gates.
Okay.
That would be remarkable because I got involved in technology in the 80s. And I remember going to meetings with Bill Gates, in a local networking group in New York City. Boy, it would be great to have dinner with him again.
Very cool.
What about you, Chad? Do you do a lot of coaching and stuff? There must be a lot of very interesting people in your head.
Well, I'm going to play off of your baseball lead, though I'm going to go Johnny Bench. He's my baseball hero. I lived in Cincinnati when the Big Red Machine was going on. I played catcher when I played baseball. And for the other, I'm going to go Voltaire. Just that he's a philosopher that's always intrigued me. And it would be interesting to get different perspectives and just different, I think, entertaining conversation on different topics like that for myself. But I don't know, I could probably have a dinner table with 100 people, to be quite honest. Narrowing it down to two people is kind of hard. But
well, this has been a good warm up. I mean, that's my juice is going. So it's gonna lead me to ask you this question, Jonathan. What does the generational and I have a problem. I know how to spell it. I have difficulty saying it. What is the generationality of work today? What does that mean?
Well, the generationality of work today is very much about how the four generations feel, how they interact with one another. And I tell people, that what's right for one generation isn't right for the other. And if you can figure out, if you are running a business, how to make all four generations work well together, you're going to be ahead of the game. And more importantly, if you can figure out how to push the buttons of the three generations that you're not a part of, then you're going to get ahead in the business world. I live in the law firm space, as you guys know, but the concepts that I'm talking about are universal. Everybody is what I refer to as generationally judgmental. I joke with candidates that I'm interviewing for attorney jobs, and I say, yeah, this pops up on screen, and the cartoon bubble pops up, and it says old guy. And then you start talking to me, and you realize I have this philosophy about the generational aspect of things and how I believe in the younger generations, and all that washes away. It's really interesting to see.
Well, what do you mean that washes away?
All of a sudden, they're not looking at the package, they're hearing the message. And I talk to them, I say, listen, I believe in you guys. I'm talking to people who are running law firms that are more in my age range. And I have to get them to see the benefit of hiring somebody like you. Everybody has a different need set. If you're at the beginning of your career, say, for example, you're just starting out, maybe you've met the love of your life, you're going to get married and start having children. That's a different need set than, say, somebody who's more mid-career to later in their career. Maybe that individual's starting to take care of aging parents, for example. So there are a lot of different things that go into it. And what I found as this conversation started to take hold for me about 4 years ago was there's really no one answer. I have many people saying to me, oh, send me your presentation on generationality. I'm like, it's not a presentation. It's a conversation. And the more conversation you can have with people, no matter how old they are, and get buy-in from them, then you're going to get to where you want to go in running your business, whether it's a law firm like those I service or other businesses like those that you guys interact with.
So let's.
I think that's a really interesting comment you make, though, Jonathan, especially around the presentation conversation coming out of the communication world that I do. I think people have gotten so conditioned to where, like, they're going to do a presentation, they break out the PowerPoint deck and like, oh, let's create something without thinking about what is their messaging, who is their audience, and what it's going to matter. One question I was just thinking of is there, as you got involved and excited about this topic, was there any particular industry or workplace or anything like that you were kind of like, okay, that's kind of a role model or a group or an organization that did it well early on when you began, looking into this type of work?
I think it's a moving target for everybody. I don't think there's any one company or any one firm that you could point to and say, oh, they do it great. You see surveys online, like Inc. magazine does a bunch of surveys, and everybody's looking at the positive. But the hard reality is that it takes people a while to figure it out. And then as you move along, well, the dynamic changes. People, you talk about, PowerPoints and consulting. I had one of the largest law firms in the world reach out to me, and they said, we see your posts on LinkedIn and your stuff on Instagram, and we're going through all those things here. You're like the attorney whisperer. You get it. And I'm like, not really. I said, it's really about engaging your people. You need to, and give them some buy-in to the conversation. So to your point, Chad, it's not like people are figuring it out. They're trying to find their way. And I think that's what makes it a fascinating conversation.
I would agree with you. But, let's define for a moment the 4 generations, because I think that would be part of this. I mean, so we've got baby boomers, right? They're going to be, it's 60 to the late 70s, right? And they certainly have their characteristics. You have the Generation Xers, and they're going to be 44 to 59. And then you have the millennials, or Gen Y, and they're going to be 28 to 43. And then finally, Generation Z, or Gen Z, they're going to be actually 12 to 27 years old. So, how do you, and each one, we all know that baby boomers, World War II, Generation X's basically grew up personal computers, millennials, the internet, and now, of course, Generation Z, the smartphones and stuff. How do you, when you have your conversations, how do you kind of like weave that in? How do you talk about the differences? How do you talk about the similarities?
Okay, well, in the space I work in the recruiting world, I contend that if you have boomers with vision, Gen Xers with ability, millennials with potential to become those people, and Gen Zers with drive, you have the best of all 4 generations. What separates them? Their experience level. So for one of the things that I find interesting is people try to make it more complicated than it is. I did a roundtable for a bunch of managing partners of law firms about a year ago. And I'm standing in front of the room, and one guy stood up and he said, let's cut through all the BS, John. How do you recruit people? What are the two top things you look for when you recruit people? I'm like, that's easy. Number one, subject matter expertise. No matter where they are in their career, they got to know their stuff. Number two, good human being. Because if they're good human beings with subject matter expertise, if you're running a business, whether it's a law firm or another kind of business, you should be able to plug people into the right spots.
So you're an attorney working in the staffing and placement industry. Was there like an aha event for you, or like a light bulb that you're like, you know what, I'm more interested in this aspect of the work? Like what drove that like transition into doing that for you?
Well, it's kind of a funny story, Chad, and it's been the story of the last 4 years of my life. I've been recruiting since I was 19, and I tell people I have no other skill set. And it's funny to me because I've always said, well, get the biggest funnel of people, whittle it down to the few, and then present those people to clients for various roles, depending on what they need. And about 4 years ago, I was on with an associate who was a trust and estates associate. She was probably about 32 at that time. And I was talking to her about the generationality thing. And I'm saying to her, I believe in you guys. I think somebody should be advocating for you guys and all of that. And she said to me, John, I want to stop you. I want to say something to you, and I hope it doesn't offend you. And she said, I never hear any recruiters talking this way. Never mind somebody your age. And I hope that doesn't offend you. And I said, not at all. I consider it an enormous competitive advantage because I believe in you guys. And she said to me, you really need to get out there with this message. She goes, it resonates. And I said, well, I was never a Facebook guy. I was never really much of a social media guy. I'm good like in person. I'm okay like this on video. I said, but, really for me, it was about that interpersonal interaction. She said, well, that's what I mean. So my assistant is about 33 or 4, and we were talking about it, and he's very adept at all the things social. And we popped out in April of 23 on Instagram and LinkedIn with the messaging toward all 4 generations. And when people go to my company's LinkedIn posts, they'll see, if you're a millennial, you could be doing these things, or you're a mid-career partner, you could be interacting with people this way. And what I found was that it was lighting a fuse to a fire that has now turned into an inferno. It's people want to know what everybody thinks. I don't have all the answers. All of everything I'm talking about is anecdotal. It comes out of my mouth every day through interaction with individual people. But what I found is that people are starved to kind of learn how they can navigate what seems like an intractable marketplace. I might have told the story to you, Michael, in pre-production, but Chad, I was telling the story about my wife and I had our master bathroom done last year. And the contractor had a bunch of subcontractors. One of them was the plumber. And when they finished, the base of the toilet was leaking. So the plumber came back and he was complaining and he's talking about these kids. And I told him, you got to put the silicone around the base and then you take your finger and you put it around to create the seal. He goes, but these kids, they don't listen. I'm like, oh, how old are you? 28. I was like, and you're bitching about the 19-year-old. Okay. So what that says to you is that everybody's starved for a better way of understanding everybody. So for me, it all started 4 years ago. And as conversations have kind of come through, different groups have told me different things. And companies and firms are trying to figure it out. Now that we're post-pandemic and everybody's getting back to the office and all that, people are trying to figure out ways for everybody to interact together. And what I found in starting this journey, it's just more of an extension of how I've always recruited. But if you have an understanding of your people, then you're going to end up running a better business, whether it's a law firm like I deal with or companies like those you guys deal with.
So let me ask you this question. I'm looking at some of pre notes, and I see that each generation has different attitudes toward work, right? Mm-hmm. So, there's a whole list here. How people communicate, work styles, how do they see work-life balance? What are their views on authority or hierarchy? What are their attitudes on diversity or inclusion? And there's more. So, as a recruiter, I know you said you're looking for two things, subject matter expertise and a good human being. But knowing that's the bigger picture. How do the law firms, how does management deal with all of these different ways that the different generationals deal with? I'm
sorry to cut you off. They're trying to figure it out as they go because they don't know. Basically.
But those that are successful. So tell me the ones that are successful. Yes, I understand they're trying to figure it out. Let's assume there are two groups or three groups. One that have already figured it out, ones that are still trying to figure it out, and ones who have no clue. So let's take all three for a moment. Let's take the ones with no clue. What happens there?
The ones with no clue?
No clue.
They will have an exodus of people that they won't be able to control because competition's too strong, and they will be thrown a bucket of cold water to get their attention. The ones that have realized it but are kind of stumbling, they don't give themselves enough credit for trying. And that's one of the things that I found, especially with call it the 2.5 younger generations. They want to know that the firm is out there trying to kind of figure it out. One of the things now that I'm coming across is we don't know, we changed our office configuration to bullpen so everybody could be more collaborative. And now a generation's coming along where they want doors on their office. What are they doing? Are they surfing the internet? Are they, spending all their time on TikTok? No. What's the difference is, and I tell this to associate and counsel level attorneys who are more in the first half of their career, what do they want? They want to do interesting work with good people at a fair wage with an organization they believe in, and then they want to go home and they want to have a life and they don't want to be defined by what they do for a living. I'm the youngest of the boomers, unlike the boomer generation. And so that's the difference there. The firms in the middle that are kind of trying to figure it out are taking all of that and trying to utilize it by doing things that work for their particular company or firm. The firms that are ahead of the curve on it, it comes down to two things: communication and accountability. With return to work, for example, everybody's trying to figure out how to get everybody back in the office. And in the law firm space, and I assume in the corporate space, the associates or the younger employees are like, well, why do I need to go into the office? I could do all my work remotely and this and that. And management was saying, well, we got to get them to come in. And my thing is, well, if you can get the partners to get from Martha's Vineyard or the Hamptons into the office, you're not going to encourage the younger people to get in there. So the firms that have been successful have communicated that effectively to the associates and engaged them in a way where they have buy-in, they have agreement on what's going to happen moving forward. And then the accountability piece. It's about self-accountability. It's about, I had a very large law firm reach out to me complaining about their young associates and they're paying them all this money and they can't get them to come to work. I said, you know what I'm telling those people? Fresh out of law school, what are you doing? You spend all this money on law school and you're sitting on the Upper East Side of New York or in Brooklyn in your Lululemons or your Adidas sweatpants and you're thumbing your nose at the man because you think you're doing work in your living room and that serves you. Well, here's what's going to happen. Your cohort who's in the office, working in an office where there aren't a lot of people right now, maybe works for months on end without seeing another human being and then goes to lunch one day. And at the elevator are Michael and Chad, two partners. And they said, what's your name? Oh, John Sheppard. Oh, yeah. Do you work in the litigation group here? Yeah. Oh, you know what? Come to my office. We have something for you to do. And Michael and Chad hand John that work. He returns the work. He's all excited, like he's getting a shot with a partner, and he never hears from him. And about a month and a half later, Michael and Chad are walking with a third partner. And they say, oh, this is the guy we were telling you about. What's your name again? Oh, yeah, John. This is so-and-so. And, and that person says, I'm Sally. Why don't you come to my office about 2:00? And you show up at Sally's office and she's on a call. She puts the call on hold. She goes, you know what, John, sit down, listen in on this call, and then we'll talk about it. Now you've gotten 2 touch points with 3 partners at a firm that if you were sitting in your living room, you wouldn't get.
So, I mean, we certainly know there's a famous director who says, showing up is one of the keys to life. So
90% of life is just showing up.
there you go. There you go. Chad, you have any more? You have another question? Because I can keep on going.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting situation now with the return to office. Amazon recently laid down their edict that everybody will be back in the office by 2025. It's interesting to see how this plays out. I've had a number of clients that I've worked with just around that messaging, and the ones who kind of gave the go forth to the four winds and do whatever you have to do without qualifiers, those are the ones that are having the biggest struggles, because people made various decisions versus saying, based on what we know now, or for this temporary situation, something that's like, let's kind of keep it close. But when I think of organizations that have done well in crossing the generational borders from an effective or purpose-driven perspective, one of the groups I think of is, I was in the Navy, you have at least 3 generations usually. You have the upper ranks, captains and above. You have the mid-grade officers, lower officers, and enlisted, and then the age grade, breakdowns within that. That's probably more of an extreme example, that you have very rigid, like, this is how you will perform, this is how you will behave. Is there, like, how do you see that blending between that extreme to the loosey-goosey extreme of, do whatever floats your boat to bring people together, especially when they've kind of had this freedom for 2 years, and now people want to kind of coalesce back? Maybe it's a hybrid solution for certain days of the week. Maybe it's 5 days a week. What do you advise your clients how to approach that, bringing that kind of to where they want to be?
Give everybody a voice. Very simple. Give them all a voice. I had a law firm client of mine that did something that was brilliant last year. They had a company come in to assess all their attorneys. And it was business development driven. So all the partner level people got a business development plan, and they did a bunch of surveys among the associates. And the associates came back and they said, we love it here. We're getting good mentoring, we're getting good training. We'd like a little more say in policy before it happens. And it was very much about return to work. So the management committee heard it. Not only did they react to it, they created a spot on the management committee for the associates to elect one associate to a 2-year term every year. And they were saying, we believe in you guys. We believe your input's important. We're going to give you a voice. We're going to hold you to account, but we are going to give you a voice. And that's where it keeps coming back to that communication thing, Chad.
Actually, I had written down, you had talked about, people, whatever it is, whatever generation, are looking for interesting work, good people, good wage, and to be able to go home and not be defined by work. And I think one thing I would add to that, which you just said, give everyone a voice, I call that impact. I think every employee in every organization, whether it's a law firm or whatever it is, everybody has to feel that they are making a contribution, and the contribution is recognized. That then everyone has impact. Now, that doesn't mean everyone has the same impact, but as long as every employee somehow in their role feels that they've made impact, that's important. So now my question is, okay, and you said the way this one law firm gave a voice to people was to put them on the committee. Well, what about bringing in other resources? Are there leadership training? Are there seminars, webinars, get-togethers where you bring in all people from different generations and kind of get them to talk to one another? You see that happening today as well?
Not happening as much yet in a formal setting, because in the space that I live in, law firms, any hour away from your desk is an hour of billable time that you're not getting out to a client. It's how, this one firm that reached out to me, an enormous firm, the managing partner of the firm said to me, so what's in it for you? Do you want to be a consultant or something like that? I'm like, I'm not a consultant. I'm not a PowerPoint guy. I'm not someone who's going to say, if you do these 5 things, your troubles are over. I said, for me, this is a way for me to meet more people. My end goal is to recruit people. So I'm trying to get out there, have this conversation, and have people in the marketplace say, you know what? I like that philosophy. I'm an attorney looking for a job. I'm going to have this individual help find me something. That large law firm, they have hundreds of HR people, and they don't have it figured out yet either. It comes from the top down, and it really is what I refer to as micro-targeting. It should be amongst a group working together. If you're a labor and employment group in a law firm and you're 12 people, put the 12 people together, work out what's best for the group in the bigger context of the firm, and then kick it upstairs. And then you have enough of those groups coming together, and then you have a new policy. We're in a different time now, and it's not only, a lot of people talk about the generational thing, and they think, oh, we have to like pat all the millennials on the head all the time, and pat all the Gen Zers on the shoulder. They're not interested in that. They want. I played a round of golf over the summer with two 31-year-olds. One guy worked for a large investment bank, the other guy for a large consulting firm. And it brought up what you said earlier, Michael, brought this to mind. I said, what do you want more of, recognition or advancement? And they both said advancement, because if you're advancing me, you already recognize I'm doing the job. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah. I said, and you don't want to be patted on the back. He said, no, I want to be looked in the eye. And I said, correct. You want to be treated like an adult. But what you have to learn is with that comes responsibility. You don't get everything. You have input, but you also have accountability. And he looked me in the eye and he said, I want to work for the firm that wants to make me as accountable as ever. I was like, beautiful. You're going to do well.
Well, now take this out of the law firms. Can you
Sure.
take this concept of I'm having trouble saying it, generalization, whatever. If you could take this concept out of the law firm, have you thought about taking this on the road to other companies, big companies, nonprofit organizations, or other types of companies? What have you experienced there?
What I'll say is everything I'm talking about is universal. The generationality of work is not only in law firms. It's not only in nonprofits. It's not only in corporate America. It is weaved throughout the fabric of our country now. This is a time where you have people of that, like you and I, Michael, of that boomer generation. And a lot of people accuse the boomers of hanging on too long, right? But we still have a lot of gas in the tank, right? The people that realize that are the people that are going to really do well. I'm proud to know that I have friends from age 15 to 95 and everything in between, business associates across the board. It is a universal thing. It's not only really related to the workplace. It's in everything we're doing. And it's really about understanding your place, being a little humble, being a little courteous, to those who maybe are not of your generation. Whether, I tell people about my daughter-in-law, and she's like, you're one of the most hip boomers I've ever met. And I said, I'm glad you think that way, but you're going to have to keep me up to speed on everything. She's 27. And it's like, I want to learn about your generation so I can interact. And like that candidate said to me a while back, 4 years ago when I started this journey, she said, you're not trying to be me, but boy, oh boy, do you get me. I was like, that's great.
So in closing, Jonathan, where do you see this progressing in any significant pitfalls over the next 2 to 3 years?
Let's take pitfalls first. Pitfalls, everybody's not open to the conversation. Everybody think, we did it this way. We were a very successful company or firm, for 100 years, 50 years, 20 years, whatever it is. We've always done it this way. We've made money, so there's no reason to change. So the pitfall is there, complacency. The opportunities, if you listen to everybody, you're not going to all of a sudden go willy-nilly, based upon what a Gen X or a Boomer, a Gen Z or a Millennial tells you. But what you're going to do is you're going to create an environment where people have input, where people have skin in the game, where they come back to the table together. And instead of looking at a guy like me who's all gray-haired and everything like that and thinking one thing about me, like that candidate said to me, she said, you're not like some old guy trying to chat me up. She goes, you're really trying to help me. I said, yes, I am.
Michael, anything in closing?
Well, it's been fascinating, and there's a lot of stuff is going on. It's the kind of thing I want to keep on asking you more and more questions. Just one more question, though. When you say accountability, what does that mean?
Means not only being accountable in the structure of your company or firm, but being self-accountable, doing the best job. I grew up in a lower middle class family. My father taught us, like, if you're the guy that cleans the bathroom, clean it the best way you can, right? Self-accountability. If you went to continue law school or an advanced degree of any kind, you spend all this money on your education. Now invest in your own career. Be accountable to yourself. Be on time. Show up. Do the extra work. Those are the things that are important.
Yeah, but I think by asking you that question and your answer, I think really that is probably where everybody should start. Doing the best job. What does that mean? Doing the best job to a boomer. Doing the best job for a Generation Xer. Doing the best job to a millennial. Doing the best job for a Gen Z. I think if we can all understand what doing the best job for each of those four groups, we can probably, would you say, cross the boundary, because that's really what I think is the essence of the problem, is that the boomer has a different vision of what doing the best job is. The Gen X has a different, and that's really, I think, where they have to start.
So it's a very simple answer. Meet and exceed expectation. And the boomer may have one idea, and the Gen X or millennial or Gen Zer may have another idea. But if that boomer didn't communicate their idea of successfully completing the job to the other three, then there's no expectation that permeates all four generations.
But I think there's got to be compromise on those expectations. And I think I'm going to challenge you a little bit and say that if a boomer has a particular expectation of the way a job has to be done, and the Gen Xer has an expectation of what they think the job has to be done, there has to be a compromise between the two of them to agree what does that mean. Because if they have different expectations of what doing the job really means, that's really where the problem starts.
Comes back to that word, communication.
Okay.
Well, that's right.
That's the end.
Oh, another way to distill that a little bit further might be something that people understand more broadly is do the hard things. Like if you're in too much of a comfort zone, if you're going to do the best you can to stretch yourself, to do something that's hard that maybe you don't understand now, you don't want to go to the office, or you don't want to go on that business trip, whatever it might be. You don't want to go to that professional development, is to do the hard thing.
Do the hard thing, communicate. What's absolute in American business, no matter what the industry is, if your customer or your client is getting the result they want, they're going to pay your invoice and they're going to give you more work, right?
Nope.
Now you can reverse engineer everything else. How many people you assign to a task, how they interact, what the communication looks like, and everything else. Stay focused on doing the best job. And people will fall short or not communicate an expectation accurately, but as long as that communication is going on, then the path ahead is less strenuous for everybody.
All right. And on that note, I think we've reached our time. So, Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us. I know this is a topic that is, even though people might not recognize it, they're living in it.
100% every day. Gentlemen, thank you so much for letting me join you today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I did as well. Thank you, Jonathan. This was terrific, and I hope our audience is enjoying it as well. I think this is time to say goodbye, right?
Yep. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next episode.
Bye-bye.